Greetings. This is the commentary or sermonette on the song Jesus and the Woman Caught in Adultery. The dynamics of this setting are extremely complicated. To understand what happened with Jesus and this woman caught in adultery, we need to back up a little bit to discuss the temple itself, because that's where this incident occurred. Under Roman domination, the Jews had been given quite a bit of autonomy, quite a bit of freedom. For example, they were allowed, the Sanhedrin, 70 elders is what it was understood to be, they were allowed to have officers so they could arrest people. They could also put people on trial. They could also mete out punishments. And if you remember, whenever they brought Jesus to Pilate, Pilate said, "Go ahead and judge him according to your own law." Well, we're not allowed to put anyone to death. So there were limits on what they could do, but they could do an awful lot. And there's a lot of sarcasm in that remark by Pilate, because on two different occasions the Jews had brought to Rome complaints about Pilate, and Pilate had been reprimanded by his own government. And so I do not think he probably had a whole lot of love for the Jewish leaders, if even the Jewish population itself. So the temple was their domain. They didn't have to put Caesar in there where people worshiped, because the Jews were extremely monotheistic after they'd come back from Babylon. They won that argument against Rome. It's very difficult for us to understand how important the temple was for the Jews and their entire identity as a people. And the Romans knew that the Jews saw themselves as the chosen people, which they were, but how the Romans must have despised having domination over a people, and those people considered themselves still superior. Getting back to the temple and Jesus' place in the temple, to back up again to an earlier incident, we're told that he came and he cleansed the temple. He drove out the money changers of the temple. Now these were individuals that were there, and as people were bringing in either things that were their tithes that they were bringing in, like if they'd come with money in hand and then they had to buy things that they could offer as their tithe, which was, by the way, either produce or animal. They couldn't offer any money as a tithe. But they couldn't use heathen money to buy those things. So the money changers were there to exchange it into clean money, Jewish money, that then they could then buy these things and then present their offerings, whether it's their tithes or their offerings. Jesus came into the temple and drove them out. When you go in and can drive out money people who are in their own territory doing sanctioned procedures, for him to do that by himself is incredible. Before I became a Christian, I had sold Bibles door to door for 2 summers. It was a big family Bible, and there were photos in it of different paintings. One was Mary at the Annunciation, when the angel announced that she was to have the Savior. Well, that picture, you turn to it, you'd say to Mrs. Jones, "My, this is Mary at the Annunciation. She was really pretty, wasn't she?" You turn to the next page. Now here's Jesus in the temple at 12. He was really smart, wasn't he? So it's yes, yes, yes. Well, I happened to be leafing through those one Sunday when I had some time off, and I turned to a page, and here Jesus is with a whip over his head, and he's driving the money changers out of the temple. And I looked at that, and it shocked me, because I said, gosh, I never knew he got mad about anything. My thinking was he just was a meek man that hung around in a corner praying all the time. So that's who I thought Jesus was. Ignorance level is unbelievable. My point is that Jesus had come, cleansed the temple, and now we find in this passage that I'm singing in this John chapter 8, it says, early in the morning, he came again into the temple, and all the people were coming to him, and he sat down to teach them. Already in that one verse, it speaks volumes. By coming again, it was his custom at this point to come into the temple. Here are the Pharisees and the scribes coming to him as a group. And the angst that would be inside of them towards him is immeasurable. Their hatred for him and to want to get him. Because here he is on their turf, very relaxed, as though he owns the place, which, by the way, he did. And the people were coming to him. And what's beautiful about that, those people were not intimidated by Jesus. They saw him as approachable. They saw him as a place of encouragement, a place of hope, a place of safety. You know, that hasn't changed. Evildoers flee from him. They malign him, they lie about him, they don't know who he is, and they'll flee before him. They'll flee before us. And yet, if we're like Christ, those who have need and who want to learn, they're not afraid of us, they come. These people were coming to Jesus, and he sat down to teach them. You talk about relaxed. May God help us to be more and more like Christ Jesus himself. Well, now in this setting, the scribes and the Pharisees, they brought a woman caught in adultery. And having set her in the midst, they said to him, "Teacher," that's interesting, teacher, this woman has been caught in adultery, in the very act. Now in the law, Moses commanded that we stone such women. What then do you say? And they were saying this, testing him. It was a trap. Why was it a trap? Well, this woman was probably well known to the people. May have been even one of their number. So for them to take one of these commoners and to bring that one before Jesus and to have Jesus act against her was an attempt to destroy his audience. Well, Jesus, instead of puffing out his chest and beginning to argue with them or challenge them, says he stooped down and with his finger began to write on the ground. Actually, I love it because it's actually right on the earth. He created the earth and now he's writing on it while he's here. Well, when he bent down, I am sure that they thought, we've got him. They sprung the trap and we've got him, because it said then they persisted in asking him. It's like a pack of wolves that even though they were pointing at this adulterous woman, their eyes were fixed on Jesus. That was their target. You know, it's very unfortunate they didn't fix their eyes on Jesus in the right way, as we are to fix our eyes on the author and finisher of our faith. This next part to me is absolutely astounding. Because when he stood up and said, "He who is without sin, let him be the first to throw a stone at her," it says when they heard this, they began to go out one by one, beginning with the older ones. I am not at all convinced that just making that statement to these ferocious vipers was enough to have them turn tail. They folded in front of him and in front of these sinners and others that were coming to Jesus to be taught. These accusers folded in front of that group, even in the temple on their very own turf. This is an astounding incident. When you have people that are frothing at the mouth in a rage and in intensity like they were, I am convinced he wrote something on the ground that as they read it, he completely deflated them, totally humiliated them. Now, what is it that he wrote on the ground? Well, none of us know. But I'm going to give you some speculation. I think one of maybe three possibilities. If adultery's been committed, how many parties are involved? He may have written the place in the law about the adultery and stoning, being stoned to death, and then underneath it wrote, "Where's Fred?" I know that's not a Jewish name, but see, both were to be brought and executed. The scribes and the Pharisees are bringing the law to use against Jesus and this woman, and yet they are in total violation of it. The second possibility might be that he wrote down, and he did stoop down a second time, maybe the Roman decree that they were not allowed to execute anybody. I kind of doubt that that would have that much power, but that may be there, and he may have written it. And of course, the other thing he might have written, a third possibility, he may have started writing down some of their girlfriends' names, or maybe some people among their ranks that have committed adultery, and writing down, what about George and Suzette? But regardless, whatever he wrote, they all went out one by one, beginning with the older ones, which again, that's instructive. The elders went out first. They realized their grave error, but eventually they all did, and they all left one by one. Now, when Jesus finds himself left alone with the woman, he says, "Woman, where are they? Did no one condemn you?" And she said, "No one, Lord." He said, "Well, neither do I condemn you. Go your way. From now on, sin no more." I love that he's actually said, "From the now, sin no more." In other words, you start from right now, sin no more. He's not saying that she wasn't caught in adultery. He's not excusing her sin. But being a Jew under law, which he was, born under the law, living under the law, you had to have two witnesses in order for someone to be condemned. So there were several problems. First of all, Jews didn't have execution power anymore anyway, so that's one reason he couldn't, quote, condemn her in terms of what they wanted, for stoning her to death. But more than that, and most importantly, you got to have two witnesses. Well, it's just Jesus, and he wasn't even claiming himself to be a witness. Even if he did claim himself to be a witness, it's one. I feel extremely privileged to have been able to put this account to music, because as you can tell, it's one of my favorite accounts. I'm just getting started on the dynamics of what actually transpired in this entire event. It is my hope that you will look into this in greater detail and get a greater appreciation, not only for this episode, but for the entire dynamic that Jesus was walking in. Because you will find that he is one to be emulated. And our best efforts will never measure up. He will always tower above us as far as being a man of conviction and of courage and of cleanness and of accuracy and of wisdom. And it's my hope that as you listen to what I have to share with you, it'll be a catalyst to where you will be encouraged to seek him out, because he is worth your attention. I hate to even say it like that. He is worthy of all of our devotion, and he is worthy of all of our energy. And to learn more and more of who he is, we will never be ashamed to be representing him in this world. And that's my goal for you. It's my goal for me. One reason I'm so intense on this is because, got a little butterfly there. Come on. Go. One reason that this is so important is because none of us know what lies ahead of us and the strength that will be required of us. Now, I know we cannot completely prepare ourselves for these dark times. And when Jesus was arrested, like he said to them, this hour and the power of darkness is yours. And we may have to go into a season like that, whether it's an actual hour or a season, where evil is given temporary triumphing over righteousness and over us. I don't want that for me. I don't want that for you. We don't want that. But if that comes, for us to be able to stand, the deeper our relationship with the Lord, the greater our knowledge of him, the better off we're going to be as we enter into that. Now, we're going to need grace at that moment to give us the power we need to be able to stand. But I also am of the conviction that we need to use our sunshine, our good times, to be getting as deep a convictions as we can get on every area of His Word and every area that we can be taught, behavior-wise and knowledge-wise and wisdom-wise, so that we are not only useful for the here and now, but also that we can come through those episodes that we might have to enter into standing firm and in victory. So, I want to ask you to read articles I've written. I don't want to be wasting your time. I want you to look into the things I'm presenting to you, because I want you to grow in the things of God. That's my whole purpose. That's my whole intent. And as you examine things that I'm presenting, you would examine all things carefully and adhere like glue to those things which are good. Thank you for listening. And like I always say, I want you to listen, learn, live.